Chapter 2 of The Alps, the Danube, and the Near East by Frank G. Carpenter. This Librivox recording is in the public domain. Read by Betty B. At the World's Peace Capital. From the Slough of Despond to the Delectable Mountains, from isms and ologies to plain common sense, from nations still prostrated by the mightiest conflict in all history to the people of perpetual peace, that is how one feels when one enters Switzerland from any of the war-exhausted countries of Europe. I have called the Swiss the people of peace, but theirs has been peace after strife. Still, their fights have been only to gain or preserve their freedom and not to acquire more territory by robbing their neighbors. For centuries, this little mountainous country, surrounded, as it were, by the bullies of Europe, has guarded its boundaries and kept its independence. The city of Geneva is emblematic of peace, and its sturdy stand for liberty has made it the fitting seat of the League of Nations. Strolling about the city today, I stumbled upon two monuments that seemed to me to symbolize the role Geneva now plays. One is a great wall of sculpture made of white sandstone, 300 feet long and perhaps 50 feet high, built against the old wall of Geneva, with the waters of the medieval moat still washing its base. It is the Reformation monument and commemorates the battle this city waged for religious freedom now more than 300 years ago. In the center, cut out of the sandstone, are statues of John Calvin and John Knox, together with those of Farel and Beza, who also lived and worked here. The figures are more than 3 times life-size and are beyond description majestic. Besides the central group, there are 6 smaller statues, representing the most independent thinkers of the great nations of that time. One is of Admiral Coligny, the hero of the Huguenots, another of Oliver Cromwell, who freed England from the Stuarts, a third of the great Dutchman, William of Orange, and a fourth, under the wide hat of Puritan days, is of our own Roger Williams, the founder of Rhode Island. The other monument stands for the peaceful settlement of international disputes. It is the Alabama Room inside the cantonal capital and city hall of Geneva. Here, a great financial controversy between countries was first settled by arbitration. This was the celebrated case of the Alabama claims, and in this chamber it was decreed that England should pay over to the United States $15.5 million in compensation for the outrages committed by British privateers during our Civil War. In this same room was held the initial meeting of the International Red Cross. A citizen of Geneva, Henri Dunant, was responsible for the founding of the organization. As an eyewitness of the desperate battle of Solferino, he observed the vast amount of suffering resulting from the inability of the Army Surgical Corps to care for the thousands of wounded that lay about the field. He suggested the formation of societies in every country for training nurses and collecting supplies to be used in time of war. The outcome was the International Red Cross Society, which first met in Geneva in 1864. The Swiss red and white flag, with colors reversed, was adopted as the badge that has since come to mean so much throughout the world to sufferers from war, famine, pestilence, and other disasters. Among the relics in this room is a brass model of the Liberty Bell at Philadelphia. It is as big as a quart cup and was sent to Geneva from the Paris Exposition. Almost 50 years later, it rang to order the opening assembly of the League of Nations. Here also are a plow and a pruning hook made of the swords of Union and Confederate officers of our Civil War. Some of its citizens and the friends of the League of Nations call Geneva the peace capital of the world. The city is well situated as a home for the idea of international peace. Lying as it does in the heart of Europe and near the great ports, it is easily accessible to all parts of the earth. On a winding lake of cerulean blue, under the icy eyes of Mont Blanc, and in a climate unsurpassed for comfort and health, there is no other capital with such delightful surroundings. At its widest, the Lake of Geneva is only 8 miles across, but it is longer than from Baltimore to Washington, and in many places so deep that two Washington monuments, one on top of the other, could rest upon its bottom, and the tip of the second would just reach the surface. The lake is in the form of a gooseneck squash with Geneva at the tip of the bill. Its waters are light sapphire and so clear that in sailing over it one can see the fish swimming above the silver stones far below. It is covered with craft large and small, from motor launches and steamboats to the skiffs and canoes plying from town to town and village to village along its shores. Geneva is at the southern end or mouth of the lake, where the Rhone pours out on its way to the Mediterranean Sea. The river divides the city into several islands on which are bathhouses, restaurants, cafes, a waterworks, and a power plant. One of the bridges over the Rhone is on the site of a bridge destroyed by Julius Caesar 78 years before Christ, when he had here his first battle with the Helvetians, the forebears of the Swiss of today. The whole lake is lined with summer homes set in the midst of beautiful lawns and luxuriant shrubbery. There is a wide quay running back of the waterfront where the people promenade of an evening. This has long rows of trees much like sycamores, whose silvery trunks reach a height of 15 feet and then sprout out into gigantic umbrellas of green. Behind this quay with its trees is the Palace of the League of Nations, the chief administrative building of this world peace capital. It stands on land that once belonged to the brave Helvetians, and is perhaps but a stone's throw from where they fought so stubbornly with Caesar's Roman legions. It looks out on the lake, across which Mont Blanc is in plain view in the distance. I have called the building a palace. This is the name given it by the League and the people of Geneva, though it is in fact merely a summer hotel turned into an office building. It is a 4-story structure which you could drop into one of the big hostelries of Atlantic City and hardly know it was there. And as for its beauty, many hotels of that seaside resort surpass it. There are perhaps 200 rooms. It is built of stone covered with stucco and painted light brown. There are fine grounds and trees between it and the promenade, and at one end is a sun parlor in which I am told the Council of the League often meets. Entering the palace, I was glad to find at the door neither court flunkies in livery nor soldiers with swords and guns. Admission is free to all men and women of every nation, and a messenger behind a desk at the entrance who speaks English, German, French, and Italian tells visitors where to go and what to see. When I asked for one of the officials of the information section, he directed me to take the lift to the 4th floor, walk to room 5, and show myself in. I took the push-button elevator and rose slowly upward. As I stepped out, I saw a sign over the button notifying me that all persons are expected to walk downstairs, although they may ride all the way up. This may not seem like business efficiency, yet it can be commended on the ground of economy. I explored the building in company with a former American newspaper man now associated with the League. I went from room to room, meeting some of the higher officials, sitting in on some of the conferences, and trying to get as best I could a conception of just what the League is and what it is trying to do toward bringing about better relations between the many powers and peoples of the earth. As a result of my investigations, I am convinced that the idea of the League as it now exists is different from that in which it was conceived, or even that in which it had birth amid the terrific labor pains of the Treaty of Versailles. The babe was lusty, and many thought of the League as destined to be the strong man with a big stick. Today it is as quiet and as peaceful as the dove Noah sent forth from the ark, and it now expects to do by conference what it once thought to do by force. It is founded largely on the faith described in Hebrews as the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. But I would say further that this faith promises to be of the kind that moves mountains, and that the League is on its way to great accomplishment. In brief, the League of Nations is an association of states pledged to a new way of conducting foreign affairs. These states have signed a contract or covenant, the Constitution of the League, to do certain things. They have agreed not to go to war with each other or with any non-member nation until they have brought their disputes to arbitration before the League and have waited from 3 to 9 months after the questions have been submitted. The peoples in disagreement are supposed to follow the advice and abide by the decisions of the League, and if they begin hostilities without submitting their controversies, the other states are bound to sever all economic and political relations with the offending countries. As I understand it, there have been many mental reservations and some modifications of this first provision of the League, and for the time at least its teeth have been drawn. The second provision binds the nations to work together for certain objects of the common welfare. These include such non-political matters as promotion of the public health, the control of the traffic in opium and other dangerous drugs, and the suppression of the traffic in women and children. They relate also to certain financial and economic adjustments and to matters of international communications. To carry out these objects, the League of Nations has been organized into an assembly and council. The assembly is composed of delegates of all the member states. Each delegation has only one vote and the majority rules. The council might be called the executive committee of the League. It is composed of one government delegate from each of the 4 great powers, France, Great Britain, Italy, and Japan, and one delegate from each of 6 smaller powers. The latter are elected by the majority vote of the Assembly. The Assembly meets at Geneva once a year in September. The 10 delegates of the Council meet every 2 months. Under these 2 chief parts of the League are subordinate branches. The Secretariat General is devoted to carrying out the decrees of the Council and the Assembly. It gathers data for them, outlines future work as directed, and suggests methods of procedure. It is the great source of information about every subject with which the League has to deal, and it may be called upon by any of the members at will. This body is headed by a Secretary General who has under him about 350 experts, clerks, and officials of one kind or another. Furthermore, when occasion demands, he can call in experts from any part of the world. In addition to this body, there is the International Court of Justice, which sits at The Hague and is composed of 11 judges and 4 deputy judges elected by the Assembly and the Council. Another adjunct of the League, created by the Treaty of Versailles, is the International Labor Office. It has its headquarters here, separate and apart from the Secretariat General, which alone occupies the so-called World Palace of Peace. This is a bare outline of the Constitution of the League. What it has accomplished and what it is doing would fill many pages. During my stay, I have had talks with experts and officials from a dozen of the leading countries of the world, including Japan. I am impressed with the earnestness and confidence of them all, and with their plain common sense view of world troubles. The active workers in the Secretariat, including representatives of more than 30 nations, and perhaps an equal or greater number in the labor organization. All these men are authorities on matter relating to their own lands, and there is scarcely any subject of international interest that cannot be pretty thoroughly threshed out among them. The meetings of the Council and the Assembly are largely conferences where the delegates come together to discuss not only their differences, but all matters of common interest to the nations of the world. I understand that the greatest courtesy prevails at these meetings and that they are really bringing the governments and the peoples of the earth closer together. The work of the League is being done at a very small cost. I see no signs of extravagance anywhere, and on every hand are evidences of great industry and practical administration. So far, the annual expenses have been only about $5 million, a small sum for running the whole universe when you recall that operating the United States government alone costs more than $3 billion a year. This $5 million expense is prorated among the several nations belonging to the League, according to their hypothetical capacity to pay. With some, I may say in passing, the payment is theoretical only. And now a few words about what the League has done. I have before me an official report consisting of 72 pages of legal cap typewritten manuscript. The whole weighs 1 pound and 9 ounces, and it contains, I estimate, at least 25,000 words. My report must be confined to a few lines. In the first place, the League has really begun to exert an influence in matters of war and peace. It settled without warfare the dispute between Finland and Sweden regarding the Åland Islands, which it awarded to the Finns with the consent of the Swedes. It adjusted the Albanian-Serbian boundary controversy even after the Yugoslavs had actually come in by night and destroyed 300 Albanian villages. It fixed the frontiers of Lithuania and Poland, and although the Lithuanians do not feel entirely satisfied, they are abiding by the League's decision. In addition to arbitrating these larger questions, the League has settled minor international contentions which might have caused wars. Among the latter was the friction between Hungary and Romania, which at one time bade fair to burst out into fighting. As an example of the creative work of the League, we have the restoration and recreation of Austria. This is one of the wonders of international finance. Everyone knows how Austria, practically dismembered by the peace treaty, had reached the uttermost economic despair. It had been advanced in one way or another the sum of $125 million, and still its condition grew worse and worse. It was about to give up and go into bankruptcy when the League came in and was given a free hand to find a solution. It brought order out of chaos, and by an expenditure of only $30,000, lifted up the nation, set it on its feet, and started it on the road to recovery. In addition to these things, the League is doing much in international welfare work. More than all, it is enabling the nations to see that while each differs from the others in important characteristics and special interests, none has hoofs or horns. Another institution at Geneva that is helping the nations to get better acquainted is the summer school at the university founded by John Calvin. Here the young men and women of America, France, Great Britain, and of every country can meet and receive special instruction from international experts along any lines they may choose. Some of the great scholars of our time live on the shores of Lake Geneva, and this and other schools attract students from all parts of the world. Thus, through the mingling of the pick of their youth, the countries are being drawn into closer and closer harmony, and more people are coming around to the idea that maybe Lord Robert Cecil was right when during his trip to our country he said, "The belief held by many that all the naughty people live on one side of the Atlantic and all the goody-goodies live on the other is perhaps, to say the least, open to discussion." End of chapter 2.